Okay, can everybody hear me today? I'm gonna do a couple of tutorials that are kind of combined. They're gonna be on how to do the TMC 2209 with sensorless homing. So I made this little jig over here, but apparently my camera keeps blinking out, so I may have to restart my computer. But let me check to see if I can work around that problem while I'm doing that. But essentially what we're going to be doing today is setting up the ability to work with sensorless homing on the TMC 2208. Right now I'm switching camera inputs. Hopefully this will solve the video problem. Give me a second here. Just have to change my inputs. See if this is working. Okay, it's working for the moment. Sorry about that. So what I'm going to start with is the SKR version 1.3. And I'm going to point out a couple of things. First of all, we're doing sensorless homing. I'm only going to do one axis because obviously I have a real estate problem on the desk to show you multiple axes. So in this case, what we have to worry about is our power. In this case, on the SKR 1.3, there's USB power and there's direct power. We're actually going to use direct power today. And for everybody that's in the chat, I haven't looked at the actual messages yet, but I'm going to hook this up real quick and then I'll show you what we need to change. Let me just fix the board so it doesn't move around. So while I'm doing that, I'll peek in the chat and see what's going on. Can anybody hear me? Let me peek over here and see if apparently my camera keeps going out, so this is not good. Oh, there's a slight delay, that's why. I'm sorry. I keep having to wave my hand in front of the camera so that I can check to make sure it's working. The first camera input that I used apparently is past its life expectancy all of a sudden. So I had to switch to a different one. So let me put the board back down here. I want to make sure it's nice and snug to the actual table. And what you're going to see here is that I'm going to connect up first the axis right here for the motor. This is going to go to the NEMA that's over on here. And I need to remove some pins for jumpers. So I'm going to pop these off real quick here. Apparently I misplaced one of my tools, but that's okay. So we want to pick these out and set it up so that we can actually work with it. So I grabbed another dental pick here. What we're going to do is we're actually going to take these out because this is the default configuration that it's sent with. As soon as we get them all out, we're going to set it up for the configuration. There we go. Got one more deep down in here that I need to get out. Okay. So for this configuration, I'm going to show you real quick what it looks like. So if I go over to the website for Big Tree Tech, which I'll pull up in 2 seconds so you can see. Okay, now my screens are having fun with me today. There we go. So I'm going to bring you over to the web page in just a second. I'm just having slight technical issues like how to use my own computer, as you can tell. But let me bring it up so you can see what I'm talking about. So over here, we have the Big Tree Tech website. I'm going to click on Big Tree Tech. And what we're going to look for is the SKR for the Big Tree Tech 1.3. We're going to go in here and check the manual real quick. What we're checking for is the actual jumpers. So we're going to click on, I believe, the instructions right here. So I'm going to scroll through it kind of quick. What I'm looking for is the TMC 2209s for UART. So right here we have 2208 for UART mode, but we don't have it for 2209. So as you can see right here, they have these little jumpers that are free. Right now I have all my jumpers on, so we don't have to worry about actually setting the individual axi, but we do have to worry about setting up the UART, which is going to be that jumper, which I'll show you in 2 seconds. I just placed it there and forgot that you can't see what I'm doing. So the jumper is going to go on the red part right here, and that's going to set up UART mode. Now I've reviewed it several times how to use the actual connections for these. And normally we need to search for the enable pin, but we can just match up the pins by color in this case. So I'm going to slide these in. And that's all you have to do. So I'm going to connect the power, and if you haven't noticed on this board, I marked the red for voltage. So I'm going to loosen this up a little bit and drop these in. Notice how I have ferrule connectors on these? That's to protect the wiring from actually jumping over and creating a circuit between ground and voltage. So that's a safer way to operate it. Next, I'm actually going to connect the USB, and then I'm actually going to connect the power this time because we're going to be running off direct power to set this up. It's just easier. But first I need to match up my actual cords here, so give me a second to verify that I'm working with the right thing, because I don't want you to see something that goes terribly wrong. There we go. So the board is now powered. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go over to VS Code, and I'll show you how we're going to set this up in a second. So I need to prepare the actual stuff that we're going to be working with. So I need to first get the desktop up and running so you can see it. So I'm going to bring my downloads folder over, and I'm going to set it up so you can see in 2 seconds. Just have to set it to the other display. There we go. So right now I actually have a VS Code project open. So I'm going to close it for a moment so I can walk you through all the steps. And I'm actually going to delete this folder for a second because that was the previous configuration. And I'm going to unzip the one that I downloaded the other day. So I'm going to extract all. And I'm going to click extract. And that will help us set up the environment for that. So while that's going on, I'm going to peek into the chat, see if anybody's made any comments. Okay, now I can see everybody. How's it going, Joe? Thanks for telling me my sound's good. Hey, Delphi Office and Rex. Yeah, apparently when I went to set this up, the camera kept freezing. And it looks like it's my HDMI card went south. So I was lucky enough to have a second one sitting on the desk. So I'm going to go over to VS Code so you can see how to configure this. So inside VS Code, now that we have the file unzipped, I'm going to go to Open in Explorer. I'm going to go to my Downloads folder. I'm going to open up the first folder, then the second folder, then select folder. Inside here, we're working with the SKR version 1.3, so we need to find that, and as always, I'm going to map down to it and talk while I do it. So I'm going to go down to source core boards.h. I'm going to do a search on SKR 1.3, and as you can see, it's right here, so I'm going to copy that, and that's under the LPC 1768. So I'm going to minimize this folder, the source folder, go to configuration.h. I'm going to do a search on motherboard, and I'm going to paste it over where the ramps is. Then I'm going to go up and change my serial port to -1. And then we have to set up the steppers. So it's only one stepper in this case. So I'm going to search on the A4988. And the one that we're working with is going to be the X-axis. So I'm going to remove the comment. For this, then we have to go to TMC2209. We're going to copy that, and we're going to paste it right here. So as soon as that's in the right place, we're going to scroll down. Of course, I pasted real nice and funny, so let me fix that. We're going to actually do a little bit more than 80 steps, and I'll show you why, because I usually don't go over this. So I'm going to change this to 320. And what that is 80 doubled is 160. Then if you double it again, it's 320. So that's what I'm going to set for the X-axis for steps. You'll understand the rationale behind this in a second, because you have to do something equal to that on the configuration advanced.h. We're going to search on 800, and it may take me a couple of tries to get to where I want to go here. Here we go. So the reason I said that is I want to change the 16 microsteps to 64, and that's why I doubled, then did it again. So it's actually triple the normal steps. So we don't have to change much here except for the 800. I'm going to change to 750. And you'll understand why I'm doing this in a few moments. I'm actually going to show you a little trick to setting your actual milliamps, because I always set it to 750 and no one's understood why, but you're going to see that hopefully today. So the next thing that I need to search on the advanced configuration is TMC debug. And this is where it's going to become apparent. Whoop. If I hit Control F and then do TMC underscore debug, that'll bring us to a commented out debug sequence. So I'm going to remove the comment so we can use it, so that we can use M122 as one of our debug commands. But I also want to do a second debug, which is monitor, and that's going to be monitor underscore driver status. And of course it's underscore. And that's going to be right here. So we're going to remove the comment. And that'll allow us to use these debug commands. But we're only really interested in two of them. So there's the M122. And then there's the other one, which is right up here, which is M906. So that's all set for there. Next, we need to set sensorless homing. And so I'm going to put in probably the wrong value for this the first iteration through, just so you can see what's going on. But hopefully the sound will be good enough where you'll actually hear what I hear. So I'm going to search on sensorless. And that's going to bring us to sensorless homing. And to enable this, we need to just remove the comment. And then down here, we need to set the stall sensitivity. In this case, we're using TMC 2209. And so the highest sensitivity is going to be 255. And the lowest is going to be 0. So I already know what the value is for my setup, but I want to show you how to do it wrong. So I'm going to do probably 100. If I go a little bit below 100, you'll see even more, but this is more a sound effect that hopefully the microphone will pick up, but it's a small hissing sound. So that's all we need to configure there, but we do need to do platform.io.ini, which is going to be LPC 1768, and then we're going to compile it. Now, I've done a previous compile earlier today, so I'm going to just do a clean, and then I'm going to do the actual send to the board, and hopefully this will work. Sometimes it fails the first time through, but with this new computer, it takes probably about 20 seconds to do this. So I'll just do it again real quick, and hopefully this won't be a nightmare. So it looks like it's stabilized this time around. So I'll check on the chat to see what's going on if you have any questions. Well, I don't know if I'm doing a good job today, Yanni Lusa. Apparently I'm having fun with my hardware, so it almost looks like I'm tripping over myself while trying to do this. But I'm going to transition back to the camera in a second, but I'm going to first show you how to do the firmware load, because all of you already know how to do it, but if somebody else watches, they might not know. So I'm going to show you what we'll do in that case. We know that it's successful right here, and we know that the build is actually stored in this folder right here. So we know we have a binary that actually works, but what we're going to do is actually see if it pushed over to the upload folder on the actual drive. So I'll bring that drive up so you can see what I'm talking about, or at least I hope I will. So I have to fix my display apparently again for this. That's odd. Well, let's try scene 2. Okay, so I'm going to bring you over here, and I'm going to bring over the folder, or bring the folder up down here. So as you can see, we have our firmware.cur. This is our current firmware, then firmware.bin, which we just copied over a few moments ago. To actually install this, I need to remove the power from the board. So I'm going to actually pull the power plug. So I'm going to bring you over to the workbench so you can see this, but I'm going to do it inside Pronterface. So I'll bring it up with Pronterface in the corner, and I'll pull the plug, as you can see right here. And this takes a second to de-energize. So now I'm going to power it back up so the firmware can load. So while the firmware is loading, I need to figure out where my COM port is. And I'll show you how to do that real quick, because I'm going to be going through several different COM ports, so I'm not going to keep closing and reopening Pronterface. So I'll show you the process that's involved with this. So I'm going to bring up my computer for Device Manager. And as you can see in Device Manager, what I'm looking for is the second USB serial device. That's the COM port that we're working with. So I'm going to go back to Pronterface and put number 7 in. So inside Pronterface, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this 16 over here to a 7. And you're going to have to watch the bottom of the screen because I can't clear it very easily. So I'm hitting connect, and apparently it's not connecting. So let's see what's going on here. 7, disconnect, connect. There we go. So it's now online that I highlighted down here. And now it looks like it's offline. That's awesome. So let's figure out why. So I'm going to disconnect, connect, and we'll watch it disconnect. That's awesome. So I'm going to look at my setup here and see what I did wrong. I might have some kind of USB issue. The USB looks good. Let me check the COM port again. It still says 7, but the COM port seems a little weak. So I'm having some kind of technical issue here. So what I'm gonna do, probably have to show you on a different board if this is gonna be the issue. Let me try changing the USB to a different connection because there's probably something going on with that. So I'm actually going to try COM port 7 again, apparently. And it doesn't like it. So let's go back and look at VS Code. Maybe I made an error that I just did not see. So inside VS Code, let me bring it up so you can see. I have the actual configuration set for the right board. It says LPC 1768. Let's go back to configuration.h and check motherboard, because maybe I fat fingered something and just didn't know it. Okay, so just above here, this should be -1. That's the board type. I'm just wondering if I had a pasting error or something. So I'm going to search on the stepper driver, which is A4988. It says TMC 2209. Oh, I know what I forgot to set. So I set that, didn't I? It was 64. And we're set there. Let's see if there's something going on with the power that I'm plugged in maybe to the wrong thing. Oh, that looks right. That's super interesting. So I'm going to show you on a different board if this one's acting up. So I'm going to power everything down. And I'm actually going to use, well, I got to wait for it to de-energize. I don't know if I blew a fuse or something, or I dropped the board like 2 minutes before the video. But I've never seen this happen. But this is actually the configuration with jumpers over here that you're going to need for this. So I'm going to pull this out of the way, and I'll actually bring up a different board that's hopefully more stable. Give me a second to grab one, which is going to be the SKR 1.4, I hope. I have to figure out which drawer I put it in. Here we go. So I'll show you what I'm doing here in 2 seconds. What I had to do was swap boards. There's something unstable going on. I don't know if it's me that caused it like 10 minutes before the video or just before the video. That huge crash you heard was me dropping a drawer. So let me bring up the camera so you can see what I'm doing here. So I switched in this board. I'm going to make sure that I'm set to direct power. I'm actually going to connect direct power. So it's red to here. And like I said before, these are ferrule connectors that I put on the end. I'm going to slide these in, then torque them down. Okay. I'm going to also set the jumper the same way, but in this case it's different for the actual X minimum. As you can see, there's no jumper for it. I think this one does it via software, so you don't need that jumper, but we'll find out if it doesn't work or we see smoke. I did it wrong, and then I'll have to take out yet another board. So I'm gonna take the TMC, and notice how it's got the extra pin. I'm going to place it in here, and the actual compile in this case is going to be slightly quicker, because there was one other thing I wanted to show you, because this was going to go in the wrong direction initially, because you have to reverse it. So let's change that as well. So I'm going to go over to VS Code, and I'm going to search on invert on configuration.h. And right here, we need to change this to true because the actual stepper goes the opposite direction. So I need to change this to the SKR version 1.4. And I have to make sure that this board is actually not the turbo version. So I'm going to have to bring you over and show you how I verify that real quick. So I'm going to click on here for the workbench. I'm going to zoom in on the chip, hopefully. See if I can get a view on it for you. So there it is. And as you can see, it says LPC 1769. That means it's a turbo board. So we've got to fix that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some small changes in VS Code. Let me just zoom out real quick. So inside VS Code, what we're going to do, we're going to go over and we're going to change the motherboard. So it has to be a turbo, but we'll look at it just to verify the name. So I'm going to go up to Source, Core, Boards. We know that this is the 68 and the 69 is down here. So we know the board we're working with is the SKR 1.4 Turbo. So I'm going to copy that. Then we'll go back to configuration.h, search on motherboard. We'll paste that over the 1.3, and then we have to change the platform io.ini to 69. So I'm going to verify that I actually have a connection here by powering it up. So I'm going to plug it in off camera. Hopefully we won't see any smoke. That'll bring up the actual device. This time it's going to be COM port 13, so I'm going to skip that detail because I just saw it come up. And we're going to do an upload. So this may fail again. We may have to compile a second time because sometimes the artifacts of previous builds will cause issues. So one of the things you can do is clean, but I'm going to try rebuild. Hopefully it'll work. Otherwise I have to do a second clean. But let me look in the chat room, see what's going on. Okay. Apparently I'm having small issues with my computer today. This all worked perfectly last night, so as funny as that is, today it's not. So the build should be probably done, which just finished. And I'm just going to do a disconnect, reconnect for power to load this. So I'm going to take out the power in 2 seconds and show you that. And hopefully this time around it won't be a headache. So just took out the power. I'm going to plug it back in after all the lights go out. And in theory, the firmware will load. If we have the same error again, then we've got issues. So it looks like it's powered. The COM port, like I said, was 13. So I'm going to go over to Pronterface. I'm just going to close it and reopen it real quick so that I can hopefully not have the same issue twice. And let me verify you can see that when I bring it up. Yes, you can. So I'm back in Pronterface. It's probably going to be set to 13 or not. There's 13. So we're going to connect. This one says now online. So those G codes that I was talking about before for M122, this will tell you the status of your actual stepper. So in this case, it says that the X is okay, and it's going to continue to give us debug. So the next thing that I want to show you is this G code because it's going to be important in a second, and it's going to be M906. And this will tell you your current milliamps, which says 800. So that's one of the things that's default, but let's test out the actual end stop. So I'm going to move this axis first, and you probably are not going to hear any sounds when it moves. Okay, you hear a slight bit of sound. So I'm going to try homing and listen for the hissing sound that may occur. So can people actually hear that? Otherwise, I'll move the microphone closer. Let me check on the chat before I open my mouth too big. Okay. So I'm gonna move the microphone into the frame, and hopefully you'll hear it this time. So I'm gonna move the axis back over a little, and I'm gonna try and get this so it doesn't move with the axis. And listen for the hissing sound. Apparently there's no hissing sound this time. But if you hear a hissing sound, I'll show you what the fix is for that. Let me just move this back without knocking everything over on my desk. For safety, you should have a neat work area. Unfortunately, mine's not very neat. So what I'm going to do is actually disconnect from here for the moment. And I'm going to go over to VS Code and show you what the actual change is. So inside VS Code, you're going to go to the Advanced Configuration tab, being configuration_adv.h. And you're going to go to here. And the optimal number that I found was 120 for this value, so that you don't hear that hissing noise. So it's more sensitive, so in theory it'll shut down better. But this is an overcurrent situation that causes sensorless homing. So think of it as like a water valve that's blowing. When there's too much current flowing, it overflows and says to stop in electronics. So I'm gonna power cycle this real quick. Let me bring it back to the desktop so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm taking out the power, and that little light on the left-hand side will eventually go out because that's powering the system right now. The USB is not running power, and I'm gonna plug it back in. And that'll reload our firmware. And then we'll go back to our Pronterface session, and we'll reconnect. So let me bring you back over there. So inside Pronterface, I'm going to click on Connect, and it says the printer is now online. I'm not going to use the G code for M122 because we technically already know it's good, but I'm going to show you this one again, because if you click on it like so, it says what the current is. But we're going to try an experiment. And what we're going to do is I'm going to bring it up to 850 milliamps. So I'm going to say space, and it's the x-axis, and it's going to be 850 for milliamps. And I'm going to press enter. Now watch this down here, because this will change when I start moving the axis. And notice the sound that's going to be occurring. So it's not as exaggerated as I would like. So I'm going to home this for a second. What I'm trying to do is cause an overheat condition. So I'm going to change this to 900. Hopefully we won't see any smoke. And then I'll move it 100. Apparently I'm not able to trip it, so I'll try 950. What I'm trying to do is make this so that it's hot enough where it'll throw an error and readjust. So it'll automatically adjust itself. So let's try this again. So apparently maybe I was working with it too much last night and it was warm. But what should occur when you up the actual amps for milliamps is it'll throw an error message saying that it's running too hot. And we'll bring it back down to 750. Apparently I can't do it today. It was working beautifully the other night, but I guess we'll have to deal with that. Make sure this is 750. Yep. So it's working for now. So I'm going to go on to the next board. Does anybody have any questions about what I just did? Okay, I'm going to power this down. And the next one we'll do is the SKR. Let me just get this out of the way. And I'll check on the chat in 2 seconds. I'm also going to move this over to VS Code in a second. Apparently I'm having technical issues. Let me turn off studio mode and change it the other way. Let me try putting back on studio mode. That's good. Yeah, my studio mode just broke. That's fine. So, I'll get this out of the way. And I'm going to get an SKR board in here so that makes more sense. Now these are going to vary from board to board, the actual configuration. The documentation is, let's just say, not stellar. I just have to clean my mess up so I don't actually knock a lot of stuff. So we're going to start with the SKR version 1.1. Essentially, the process is similar to the SKR version 1.2. But this one has a different way of doing it. So I'm going to vary how much I go into certain aspects of this because you've already seen the configuration in VS Code. So we'll just change what's required. So I'm going to bring up the actual workbench. So here's the workbench. Here's the actual chipset. I have to get this power supply out of the way because that's no longer used for this configuration. And I have to bring in the other one. This one's different in that you have your motor power here and your direct power here. And then, of course, you're going to be using the drive to load it. And I've misplaced the actual PFT. So let me see if I've got it actually someplace else over here. Otherwise, I can grab one from my cabinet. Apparently, I can't find it. So I'll show you that in 2 seconds, but I'll show you how to hook up the power. So these also have a ferrule type connection. These aren't actual ferrules. But in this case, this is going to be power. So the negative or ground lead is going to go right here. And then we're going to have the positive being voltage right here. And then we have to do the same for the motors. Now this system is de-energized, meaning there's no power going through it at the moment. So always keep that in mind, that everything is de-energized. And then I'll put this one in. And then for safety, we're going to put this little cap down. Next, we have to set the actual jumpers. Right now, it's configured for SPI. So I need to pop these out without poking my finger too hard. So now that I got those out, it's actually this pin over here for UART. So I'm going to jump that pin. And then there's an additional step on this board, I believe. And I think it has to do with putting a jumper on these 2 pins for the X axis. So let me verify it's the X axis first before I do anything, and we'll go over to the manual and see what's going on with that. So I'm going to pull up the browser. And inside the browser, we're going to go back to the actual Big Tree Tech. See if we can see the SKR Pro. And then we need to find the actual manual. So I guess the folder called manual might be the place we want to go. And then we'll go into this one, which is 2019. And hopefully, Well, it looks like that's not the manual, that's the install. So we're looking for the one just below it. So I'm going to scroll kind of quickly through here. We just want to check the pins and the layout. So as you can see, this is actually not the X axis that I thought this one is. So this would be the signal pin and the ground pin. So we may have to put a jumper between those two pins to make this work. So I'm going to do that initially, hoping that it works the first time. If it doesn't, I'll remove it. So I'll go back to the workbench so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to take a jumper and I'm going to jump the bottom two pins, which are ground in the middle and signal on the bottom. We don't want to jump voltage to ground because that would be a mess. So those now have jumpers on them. So I'm going to go back over to VS Code so we can actually set this up. So inside VS Code, we're just going to go over to configuration.h. We need to change this to our board type. So I'm going to have to find that under, clean this up here, boards.h. We're going to search on SKR_Pro. And here's the version that we want to grab. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to configuration.h. I'm going to paste that over the previous configuration. And then we're going to go over to platformio.ini and we're going to do the same search on SKR_Pro. And I'm going to copy the configuration right here for the default environment because the chipset has changed. And I'm going to paste it over the old chipset environment. And then hopefully this will compile. Let me just fix this real quick. And let's see what happens. Hopefully I didn't make a mess out of this. I'm just going to do a clean. I'll clean twice just to make sure. And then hopefully this won't be a nightmare. So I'm going to click on the checkbox to compile. I'm going to go grab a SD card real quick. I'll show you what I'm doing with the SD card in just 2 seconds. I just have to open the container and then drop it on the floor. Go. So I'll show you this process real quick. I'm going to go over to the desktop and I have this card and I have this, and I'll put an affiliate link for Amazon in the actual video later on when I have to finish editing. It takes a little bit of time because they have to render this, but no one's paying me or sponsoring me to do this tutorial, so this way affiliates help me out in that I get a percentage of the sales. So I'm going to place that in there. It has two different cards that you can use, being the regular sized adapter or this one. Then I'm going to place that in my USB slot. And I'll go over to my desktop for a second so you can see what's going on. Hang on. There we go. So I'm going to enlarge this. I'm going to go to my D drive. I haven't set it up yet, so this might be a mess. So I'm going to do a quick format. And I'm going to pick the default, in this case is FAT, which is File Access Table. That's what it means. And then I'm going to format it. Once that's complete, I'm going to go back over to VS Code and I'm going to pop the folder out so I can actually copy it over. So inside VS Code, you're going to minimize, or you're going to go to .pio, build, SKR, you're going to right click, you're going to go to Reveal in Explorer. I'll go back over the bench so you can see what I'm doing here. So right now inside this folder, we have our firmware.bin. We're going to right click. We're going to send this to our drive, which is the D drive. And if we look on the D drive, we now have firmware.bin. We don't need the firmware.cur yet. So I'm going to pop that out, and I'm actually going to install it. So I'm going to go back to the workbench. I'm going to pop the drive out of the USB. I'm then going to place this inside here, and I'm going to plug in the actual power, but I got to plug in the right one because I'm about to plug in the wrong one. Sorry, I have multiple power supplies set up. So here we go. This should load the firmware, but before we do that, you've noticed it's not on direct power. So I'm going to move the pins over the jumper for these two pins. Now I'll plug it in. And this, in theory, should load our firmware. But there's one step that obviously I missed, so I'm going to have to de-energize the board. And that's the big step of, hey, maybe we need this. So as you can see, it's still gauged the same way for pins. So I'm going to plug this in. Now I'm going to plug everything in. And hopefully we didn't smoke anything. I'm going to plug in the USB. And hopefully we'll have a connection. So far I haven't heard anything pop. So let's go over and see if there's anything in the COM ports. I don't see any. So that's a problem. So I'm wondering if I set something up wrong. So I'm going to de-energize the system. I'm going to take the power out. I'm just going to plug in USB power and see what's going on. Apparently the board's misbehaving. So it may be that I actually formatted it with the wrong build, or excuse me, formatted it with the wrong file access table, or I damaged this board earlier and did not realize it. But as you can see, the light is out over here because of this jumper that I placed here. That's the correct way to do it. What's going on right now is this is actually misbehaving. So we're going to check it real quick, and maybe I can fix it on the fly. Otherwise, I'll pop in a different board. So I'm going to take this out. I'm going to plug it in here, and we'll see what we've got going on. So I'm going to pull up a folder, and we're going to look at the drive, and it looks like it didn't load. So it could be our formatting, or it could be something else. So I'm going to unplug it again, try it one more time. Actually, you can't see what I'm showing you, sorry. So this is what I was trying to show you. So let me bring it up again. I'm going to disconnect the drive. I'm going to go back over to my workbench. I'm going to try plugging it in one more time. If this doesn't work, I'll format it with FAT32, and then we'll know that that wasn't the issue. So it appears not to be loading. So let's try reformatting it. If this doesn't work, I'll have a second board as a backup that we can try. So I'm going to plug that back in. I'm going to reformat the drive. So I'll bring you over to show you what I'm doing. So inside here, I'm going to go to the D drive. I'm going to right click. And what I'm going to do is format as FAT32. If I didn't already format it correctly. And hopefully this will fix our problem. If not, I also might have a bad PFT drive. I'm going to close that. I'm going to bring up another folder. And I'm going to check on the drive to make sure it's wiped clean. So it is reading and writing. And then I'm going to go find the .pio folder real quick. And it's right here. I'm going to actually show you the D drive while I do this. I'm going to right click and I'm going to send to the D drive. So now we have it here. I'm also going to add a blank file because that might be the other issue. So I'm going to add a document, but I'm going to call it, this might be the reason it's not working, firmware.cur. The blank file, it has nothing in it. It's just a placeholder. It might be looking for this. So I'm going to disconnect this and go over to the table and try it again. So I'm over here. I'm going to put this in here. And then I'm going to connect it. I'm going to look for a flashing light or listen for a beep. Apparently I'm getting neither or neither. So at this point I'm going to swap it in a different board because this normally works quite well. So I'm going to bring over to VS Code for a second while I do that, and then I'll check the chat. I just need to disassemble this setup real quick. This was actually working pretty good the other day when I was doing this. Just surprising now that it's not working when I'm doing it live. Maybe I need to do more of these where I'm actually doing it live when I think I'm not. So I'm getting this board out of the way real quick. I'm actually going to tear down the board. It's going to be the exact same setup, just going to be on a different board. Find the other board. There it is. Find the other board. I thought I knew where it was, but I have the SKR version 1.2 on which the Pro version that's newer. So I'll put that down and I'll set it up real quick and then we'll load it. This is obviously not going as planned today. This went a lot better yesterday when I was working with it. Okay, I'll bring up the table in a second. So here's the workbench. Gonna do same as before. Note which ones we're connecting. Power's disconnected by my arm. So I'm gonna plug this in. I'm actually gonna use the drive inside this board instead because I don't trust the new one that I have in there. Plus it might be formatted differently. But if you haven't noticed, I mark these with red marks so I know where voltage is, but don't accidentally plug these in incorrectly for the wires. So I match red to red, and then the other one is obviously ground. So I'm going to pop this drive out in a second, but I'm going to quickly configure this board. I'm going to leave it in direct power. I'm going to pop these out. Apparently I'm not as good as I want to be with this pick. I'm going to put the jumper right here for UART and match up the actual stepper. Plug that in, plug in the actual stepper again, and then we need to put a jumper on the x-axis, and I think it's right there. We'll double verify again in the browser because you know I could plug things in backwards and cook something. So let's check that real quick before adding any power. So in the browser, you look in here, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to the SKR folder, go to the Pro, go to Manual, and then open up the user manual and verify that pin. So down here, there's going to be a pinout diagram right here. And as you can see, it's extruder 1, 2, and 3, or 0, 1, 2. then you have X minimum, Y minimum, Z minimum. So it's ground and signal that are grounded. So let's go modify the actual VS Code. So inside VS Code, all we have to do is go back to configuration.h, change this 1 to a 2, and same chipset for the environment. So I'm going to do a build, and it probably is going to fail, which is okay. Usually when you jump build to build, like I've said before, you might get a failure. So I'm going to pop out the drive while that's going on, and I'll check on the chat in a second because I know I've gone around in circles. And I'm going to plug in the drive into the computer. And that built, so I'm going to bring you over and let you see what I'm doing again. So over here, this is the D drive. I'm going to bring up the other folder like I did before by right-clicking and then going to View in Explorer. It's going to come up over it. So I'm going to do down below here, firmware.bin, right-click. I'm going to send to the D drive. Then I'm going to pop out the D drive, so I'll bring it back over to the workbench. And I'll also check on the chat when I get a second here. So I'll take this out. I'll place this inside here. We're on direct power, so I'm just going to connect the USB and then connect the power. There's a flashing light that tells me that it's trying to load firmware. And as you can see, there's no smoke yet. So I'm going to go over to a different view for you. And I'm going to try and connect again, but I have to check the COM port real quick. It's changed to 17. So inside here, we're going to change this number, 17, and then we're going to connect. It says it's now online. So we're going to test it by moving it. So I'm going to move it 10, and it doesn't want to move. So obviously I've done something wrong possibly, or not. But it's moving in the opposite direction I anticipated. So let's try homing. So that tells us that their actual logic is inverted on this board. So we would actually have to go back in where we had changed it. I'll show you that real quick. So if I go over to VS Code, inside VS Code where we searched on invert, down here, we had changed this from false to true earlier. In this case, it's reversed. So I'm going to change that real quick, and I'm going to upload this version, or actually build this version, then power down the board and try it again. So let me check on the chat while that's going on. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you for the super chats. I wasn't paying attention. 3D Head Tutor, thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated. Okay. Yeah, I was going to do individual tutorials on the SKR with different types of connections where I pre-recorded these, but I thought I'd try and do it live and see how well it went. And so far, you're seeing how well it's going. Oh, push the reset button? Yeah, that's one way to hopefully deal with the problem. But problem is, when I start switching boards, I get easily confused. So let me go over and see how the build's going real quick. So 29 seconds. I'm going to go back over to the workbench. I'm going to power it down. So there's no power. I'm going to disconnect this for a second. Pop this out. And we're going to reload it and see if we fix that issue. So, go over to the browser for a second. You can see that it's just got firmware.cur. It deletes the other one. If you ever wanted to reload this, you could rename this firmware.bin in lowercase and then it'll reload. But we're going to leave it alone for now, and I'll bring up the other folder. So here's the build. Whoop, that's not the build. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I'll wake up in a minute. I'm going to send that over. And that just built at 7 o'clock, so we know that's good. Now I'm going to pop this out and pop it back in. So let me go back over to the workbench. So I'm going to take it out of here and place it in here. Then I'm going to take this first. I'm not going to do anything because it's on direct power. I'm going to plug this in. And as you can see, that little flashing light is the firmware loading to the left of those 3 lights. And so I'm going to go back over to Pronterface. Inside Pronterface, I'm going to do a disconnect, reconnect. This printer is now online. So let's see what homing does first. So it looks like homing is now moving in the right direction. And so now I'm going to move 100 to the right, and then another 100, and double check the homing again. And let's see if that experiment that I tried earlier with the M906 will actually work. Hopefully it'll get noisier. I'm going to move it to 900, and then I'm going to move again. Apparently it's not working. So, what normally would happen is this will count down when these get hot. And it'll go setting to 850. And if that's too hot, it'll go setting to 800. And then it'll say setting to 750. That's why I always use the 750 number, because that's what it always bottoms out at. And that's so they can run cooler. So I'm going to try one more board. Hopefully this one won't be a disaster. This is going to be the GTR version 1.0. So I'm going to disconnect from here. I'm going to disconnect the power from the board. I was going to do 7 boards, if you can believe that, but so far 2 of them have not cooperated during the tutorial. But they're similar boards, so you get the idea. So I'm going to disconnect the power now that everything's de-energized. Normally doing this live, it would be nice one of these days where I could actually do it live and not have it have an issue. But I'm going to move you over to the VS Code screen for a second while I move this. I don't want you to see all the things I do in the background, because you'll probably wonder what I'm using underneath the board to keep it steady, and that's an artist's trick that I know that you probably have figured out already. So I'm going to pull out a GTR board. Oh, found the other Pro. How about that? So go. So this board is the high-end board. Somebody asked me today if they could find a board that can do 11 steppers. The GTR board does do, well, I'll show you in a second. Let me bring it up so you can see it. So here's the workbench. Here's the actual board. As you can see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steppers. Then they have a parallel cable you can run to it, which is a ribbon cable. It connects multiple boards. If I can find the other board real quick. So that's 6. They want to do 11. So that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And they ribbon cable together right here. So I've done a basics tutorial on that. I was going to do this tutorial separate, but I may do it anyways separate. But let's hook up a bunch of things real quick. So I'm going to hook up first the power. Now I didn't mark this one. So this is ground and this is actual power. But I'm going to double check before I run any power into the system because I don't want to cook an expensive board in front of you. That and I don't want to cook a board. If anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about when I say let the smoke out, that term means smoke test. It's an old hardware development term. It means when you're creating new hardware and you plug it in, the smoke test is that if smoke comes out, you fail. So that's also what they use in software now. So if your software fails when it's running in a test, that's a simplified test of multiple tests, that's called the smoke test. But it originally originates with hardware. It's just like bug originally, I think, was ENIAC, which is that first large computer that the US government built, I think at Berkeley. And what had happened was they used vacuum tubes and a couple miles of wire inside something the size of a house to build a simplified computer with vacuum tubes. And what had happened was a moth landed on the vacuum tube and caused it to ignite the moth, and the moisture from the moth caused the vacuum tube to crack. And that's where the term bug allegedly comes from. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, I'm hopefully not making it up. So I'm going to pop these off because I already know the configuration for UART. And this one's going to be different. So I'm going to put it on the one black over here for the x-axis. You can see there's another one for the y, z, and so on and so forth. But over here, they do something different. They have jumpers on the board already. So I'll show you what happens when we power this up just with USB power. So I'm on just USB power. I'm going to take the USB and power it. And as you can see, there's lights all along here. So if we were to power this down and pop out one of these, let me make sure I'm doing the right one. I hope this is X, but we'll see. This is one way to confirm that you're actually using X. So it should put out the light over here. So it's still on, but the other ones, I can't tell from here what I'm doing because I don't have a great angle. So I'm actually going to go to the manual and look this up. So I'm going to put the jumper back on and we'll go see what's going on with the manual because we need to know where to possibly put a jumper. So I'm going to go over to the browser. And inside the browser, I'm going to go over to Bigtree Tech. I'm going to go to repositories. Then I'm going to search on GTR. And it brings up the one thing that we're looking for. Notice they also have issues. This is where the bugs are stored. Then they sometimes have wiki or other things in here. But we're interested in... We'll start with the GTR. Let's do a picture this time. So we're looking for something that says pin. Nothing says pin, so it's kind of not useful to us. Either I'm misreading it or it's not there. I'm going to go back, go to manual. There's, I believe there's spelling for pin. Strange, but let's see. So it is their pinout diagram. So over here on the right-hand side, they say E0, E1, E2, X minus, Y minus, Z minus. These are end stops right here. So I'm going to leave the jumper on for this one, just to see what happens. If we see smoke, then you've seen the proof of a smoke test. So let's go back to VS Code. Inside VS Code, to set this board up, it's very similar. Hopefully things don't reverse on us again. But I'm going to go over to Core Boards, and I'm going to search on GTR underscore, well, there it right is, or there it is. I'm going to copy it, go back to configuration.h, search on motherboard. I'm going to paste it over the previous board. Then I'm going to go over to platformio.ini and I'm going to search on GTR underscore. And that's going to bring us to our default environment. Then I'm going to scroll all the way back to the top and put that in for our default environment. Then I'm going to clean my build because multiple build types cause multiple issues, and hopefully this will build. Let me check on the chat now that I've been talking continuously. Yeah, a lot of people do call it magic smoke, or pixie dust, or there's a bunch of different terms for it, but it's a really bad feeling when it happens. I try and avoid the poofs. The reason that I started doing the tutorials was I was following other people's tutorials and had things explode. Literally fry. So that's one reason I've made a lot of tutorials over the last 3 years. It's to prevent other people from having that experience. So for those that don't know, I've also created a second place to display these actual videos while I'm doing while I'm doing live streams. That's actually, I can't talk right now. That's actually on Twitch. I'm trying to build that up so that I can have multiple places where people can catch my streams. If you notice anything wrong with my Twitch channel, let me know, because I'm still trying to populate it so there's information on there. But I opened the Twitch account probably about, what was it, 2 years ago, and then started using it obviously within the last month and a half. So I might be in some kind of legacy mode, but if you can point me in the right direction or you see something wrong that I need to fix, let me know. And that's I believe E. Brayman on Twitch. I'll put a link in the description of this live stream in YouTube if you want to find that and subscribe over there. Be greatly appreciated. So let me jump back to the build real quick. So inside the build, I just have to get on the right thing here. Sorry about that. It says successful, 29 seconds. That's awesome. So I'm gonna actually load this one again. So I have to actually pop out the TFT drive or micro SD drive, and I need to put it back in that little thing that I've been using for the adapter, and place this back in. And I'm not going to show you this step yet again because even I don't want to see it again. And I'm going to place this back in the computer. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to try and shorten this up. So I'm going to go to .pio, build, GTR, right click, go to Reveal and Explorer. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to right click. Well, now you can't see it, so let me show you it. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to send to the D drive. So we're all set there. So I'm going to go back to the desktop so you can see what's going on. I'm going to pop out the drive. I'm going to take the drive out of this and put it in here. And this time I'm going to put it on direct power. And I want to verify the actual power here because it makes me nervous when I connect this. So it's going to be voltage ground, voltage ground. So I'm going to go back to the browser and verify that before I put any power in this. So inside the browser, as you can see over here, they show positive, negative, positive, negative. So voltage ground, voltage ground. So we're good there. And notice how it's 12 or 24 volts. So I'm going to go back to the workbench and hopefully we won't see any smoke. I'm going to plug in the actual USB. Then I'm going to plug in the actual power. Next, I'm going to go over to Pronterface. I'm going to double check my COM port, which is not visible to you, but this time it's going to be 4. So I'm going to change the 17 to 4. And for those that joined late, I'm actually looking at the device manager for the new COM port. That's how I'm telling. And it says printer is now online. So I'm going to test this by moving the axis. Of course, the axis isn't going to move because I made the same mistake I made before. So we're going to go back to the desktop and I'll show you how to fix that. So Workbench, disconnect the power. So the power is now disconnected. Give it a second to de-energize. And here's the major step. So we find how the pins match, and then we match them up. So I'm going to plug that in. I'm going to plug back in the USB, and I'm going to plug back in the power. Then I'm going to go back to Printerface, and I'm going to try and reconnect. Hopefully the USB hasn't re-enumerated. I'm going to disconnect, connect. It says printer is now online. Now I'm going to try and step again. So it's going the opposite direction, which I've just showed you the solution for this a second ago, but I'll do it again. So we have to power down or disconnect. So I'm going to disconnect the power. As you can see right here, I have to pop this back out. And what it is the logic for the stepper is the opposite direction. I didn't realize the order of my tutorials would show this, but it's kind of a plus because now you get to see that I'm actually troubleshooting and it's actually working for once, or at least that's what I hope is occurring. So now that I got that plugged in, I have to go back over to VS Code, and hopefully this compile will be quick. So I have to minimize this, go to configuration.h. I'm going to search on invert, and it's probably a couple down. And right over here, the false needs to be a true, and this will change the direction of the stepper. So I'm going to hit recompile, which is build. I always say compile because that's what I learned first. Build is technically multiple compiles, but I like to say compile because that's the term I understand best. Or basically it's changing it from, in this case, this is like a C-like language. This is actually a configuration file. A C file would look like this. Well, that's not a good example. Let me find one real quick. So if we go to a source, maybe these are all going to be .h probably. Here's a C file. Not a very good C file, but it includes libraries or other files. In this case, it's a header file, which is more like a configuration. And then there's pin logic going on in this case of what's being set high to low. And everything ends in a semicolon. When it actually builds or compiles, it's taking it from an English-like language and moving it into a binary type language. That's why we get binaries. And binaries are 1s and 0s. The, what is it? The version of like the ramps would be 8-bit, and they have a different way of loading. I believe it has to do with some kind of bit message is sent in hexadecimal, and then it loads everything with hex, but that's a different way of loading. We're working with binaries, so I'm going to actually concentrate on the 32-bit that we're talking about right now. So I'm going to go over to .pio, build, GTR, right click. I'm going to reveal an explorer, and I'll show you what's going on. So I'm going to go into the Big Tree Tech GTR, right click. I'm going to send to the D drive, which is over here, and I'm going to pop all this out. So I'm going to go back to the desk for a second. I'm going to pop this out. I'm going to de-energize what's there. I'm going to take the SD card or micro SD card, plug it into the TF drive, plug this back in, and then plug in the power. And hopefully, as you can see the flashing light there, it's loading. So I'm going to go over to Pronterface. I'm going to connect to this again. Hopefully it will work. So it says online. So let's move to the right again. So it's working. So I'm going to move it over 100. Now this is limited to 100, so it might not count all the way over. It's supposed to stop, but it might be that I'm doing multiple moves here. That might be a bug inside Pronterface or inside Marlin, more likely. But let's check the sensorless homing. So that appears to work. Let's try it one more time. Now, a couple of things that I haven't gone over. Inside here, I'm only using one UART stepper at the moment. If we were to do two, the actual sensitivity may change. And sensitivity, by what I'm saying, is the actual sensorless homing sensitivity. So let me go back over that for a second. So inside VS Code, where we looked at sensorless homing, this variable can change from either 255 or 0. For 0 being the lowest sensitivity, I believe. So super sensitive. And then, actually, this is the highest sensitivity. I'm saying it backwards. So this is very sensitive. This is not sensitive at all. It'll probably ignore the end stop and keep making noise, and the overcurrent won't matter. Now there's other functionality in here, but I don't have a lot of time to go over it. I just wanted to show you sensorless homing on several boards. I was going to do the MKS, but I'm an hour and a half in and only showed you 3 successful boards. 2 of which are similar types. But let me see if there's any questions or comments. Okay, so yeah, we've talked about the magic smoke. You could probably use a memory card on the actual board. I've actually never tried it, but I'm supposing it's possible. The only thing you have to worry about with the actual drive, the reason that I always use a 128 megabit drive is because I know that each one of the boards is designed that when it powers up to point to a particular location on the drive. And if you put a super large drive in, like a 10 gigabit or 16 gigabit drive, what occurs is it points to the wrong place on the drive. But one of the techniques you can use to address it is to partition your drive. But I highly recommend getting the 128 megabit drive so you don't have to worry about that problem. So, does anybody have any questions? I don't know if my sound is good right now, because obviously my feedback comes from you making comments. Yet again, I want to thank the people that have taken the time to do super chats. It's a great way to help me offset some of the costs of doing this tutorial. As you can see, I may have cost myself 2 boards, but probably not. I think they're just formatting issues. But I can troubleshoot one of those if you want to see me do that. It's not terribly interesting, but it just involves me doing the same operation over and over until it works. And it's probably something to do with the firmware load, is what I suspect. So what I can do is grab one of those boards and see if we can fix it, and I'll use the drive out of one of my other boards to see if that's the issue. I won't use the same build, but I'll try this real quick, and then I'm going to wrap it up for the day, because I'm getting a little bit cottonmouth, if you can believe that. And any suggestions on me having background music play while I do this, so that I can talk a little bit less for you guys, or would you rather have me just completely babble the entire time I do this? And by the way, I forgot to ask where everyone's from today. You don't have to tell me, but Gives me an idea of who I'm talking to and possibly what language I can talk in, briefly that is. Oh, you mean the noise canceling foam in the background? I didn't know everyone could see that. I have foam on the wall directly across from where I'm doing the tutorial, so the sound hopefully gets absorbed. The other plus is that my neighbors can't hear me very well because I have a very loud voice while I'm doing this. But let me pull this board out of the way and I'll put another one down. And I think that was the SKR Pro version 1.0 that we're having issues on. So let me grab that one and see if we can fix it. I'm going to take the actual TFT drive out of this and I'll pop in the other board. Just lining up this board real quick. Hopefully we can fix this situation. Otherwise, I might have spent $50 in the wrong way without seeing smoke. So let me put the board back down and then I'll let you see what I'm doing. So we go over to the workbench. Got the board here. I'm gonna hook up the power. Now it's red, no color, red, so we know that it's voltage ground, voltage ground. Easier to do these one at a time. That's one. That's two. It's actually the wrong board. Sorry, using the SKR version 1.1, aren't we? I'm sorry. Let me get this one out of the way. Funny thing about doing these is everything that I work on is inside like a stadium-like environment, meaning that it's surrounded by lights. The camera's above. So my work area, I have to like stare from a distance. Then I put stuff in drawers while I'm doing this. Don't always know where I put it. So it should be in one of these. Pro. Oh, here it is. I placed it over on the right side of my table. I thought I put it inside the drawer. So let me put this back down. I almost knock over the camera. So I'm going to hook up the power. This one's unmarked. So it's voltage ground, voltage ground. This is for the steppers, or the motors. Apparently they also wired this board backwards because power is usually down at this end. So if I've done a tutorial where I've spoken in reverse, the reason is the other 90% of tutorials I've done before that were actually all down here for power. Then it moves up towards the thermistors, or excuse me, the extruders and the heat bed over here. But this board's a little different. So that's down for safety. We already have the jumper in the right place. I need to find a actual stepper, and I think I left it in the last board. Grab a different stepper. This might cause an issue because this stepper, I'm not sure of if it's stable or not. I may have broke it and not known. So we plug that in. I'm actually going to take this drive out because I don't trust it at the moment. I'm going to use the GTR's drive and plug this in here, and then plug this into the computer. I'm going to check my jumpers real quick on here. So right now I'm on USB power. I'm going to go to direct power. It's not going to do anything for me at the moment because currently the actual power source that we're going to be using to power it for loading is actually direct power. So let's go rebuild this real quick. So by now, if you haven't seen the steps, I'm going over to configuration.h. I'm searching on motherboard. I'm obviously not on the right board type, so I need to go back over here. I always confirm this. It's just a habit now. But I'll go to boards.h, and up in here we should see the SKR, but I'll do a search on it just to be good. So I'll search on SKR_Pro. Brings me to the board that we were working with. I'm going to copy that, go back to configuration.h, paste it right here. If you haven't already noticed, I talk a little bit faster when I'm filming tutorials. If you can't understand me, I will be eventually putting in closed captioning for obviously English and 120 other languages. But as you might guess, it takes me about a half an hour to do. Once it's available for me to do, due to YouTube's algorithm, I sometimes get queued in the back where I have to wait a day before they allow me to edit. So what I'm going to do is go over to platformio.ini, and I'm going to search on the SKR Pro. I copy the environment, go back up to the top, and hopefully we can get this to work. So I'm going to click build, and it's probably going to fail. And while it's trying to do that, I'm going to check on the chat real quick. Yeah, I've got a couple of things that I've set up to deal with actual noise. I actually have filters as well that are software, but I actually have a sound board made out of foam sitting right in front of where I'm talking, because in my kitchen it echoes a lot. You've been lucky enough probably not to hear the refrigerator directly behind me, really half a foot away, and before filtering you could hear it. So the build was successful, so I'm going to open the folder up and hopefully we'll get this fixed. So if not, I may have to do more research on the board, but I'm pretty sure the board's still okay, or at least that's how I like to think about it. So I'm going to go to .pio, SKR Pro, right click, go to Reveal in Explorer. I'm going to minimize this down so you can see both things at once, and I'll bring you over to it so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to go to my browser, open the SKR Pro folder, right click on bin. I'm going to send to the D drive. Then I'm going to go back to the workbench and we'll try and load it up and hopefully have a better day of it. So pop this out, take the SD card, pop it in here. I'm going to put in the USB, then I'm going to put in direct power. Double check my power before I begin. Looks good. So it's energizing. It looks like something's loading because you can see that flashing light. I hear a USB drive, which is even better. So I'll show you what's going on and why I was concerned earlier. So I'm going to go over to my desktop, show you this. This wasn't showing up when I was trying to show you earlier. It has to do with the -1 for serial, for the first serial port, not loading. or there was something about the actual drive that I was using that wasn't stable. But this turned out to be stable. So I'm going to go over to Pronterface and try this out again. So inside Pronterface, I'm going to connect. Obviously, I'm not connecting to the right COM port because it's COM port 5. And change that, and then I'll connect. Now what I'm going to do is try and move the axis. It might move in the opposite direction, which is okay. Or it might not move at all. Give me a second to see what's going on here. Oh, actually you guys probably already see it. Look to the left of the board for the cable. So I need to go back over here and fix this. So I'm going to disconnect this, de-energize the board, take the connector, and connect it in here. Yeah, I'm guessing you guys are a lot smarter than me because I obviously didn't realize it. I'm going to plug it back in. I'm going to go back over to Pronterface. I'm going to reconnect. I'll have to disconnect, connect. I'm now online, so let's see if it moves. So it's going the wrong direction. We already know the fix for this. So I'll go back and fix that real quick, and then I'm going to wrap this up. So if I go over to VS Code, inside VS Code, I'm going to go over to configuration.h. I'm going to search on invert. And it's going to take a second for me to get there. Down here, we're going to change the direction to false. And this is the one with the jumper on it, correct? Yes. So I'm going to hit build. I'm going to de-energize the actual board for a moment and set up the actual SD card real quick. Hopefully I can do this before it finishes. But I'm probably not going to fix the SKR only because it's getting hard for me to talk. When I talk for an hour and a half continuously, I get a sore throat. So let's go over and see this real quick. So I'm going to go over to the .pio folder, right click on Reveal in Explorer. I'll show you what I'm doing. So I'm going to go into the folder from .pio, right click on the bin, send that to the drive, then I'll pop the drive out and reinstall it, and hopefully we'll be good to go. So let me pull that up. Normally the issue when you run into problems with loading is your actual SD drive is gone south. At least that's my experience. So I just energized the system. I'll go back over to here. I'll reconnect. So disconnect, reconnect, sorry. And then I'll try again. So it's moving. So let's test to see that it actually works. That's pretty good. So does anybody have any questions or requests for future videos? Let me check on the chat real quick here. So what I was planning on doing was a BL Touch next, but that's going to be a slightly different tutorial. I might do it tomorrow depending upon if I finish this actual part that I'm working on. I'll show you it real quick. I'm just going to have to set up the screen so you can see it. So as you all know, I made a design previously that included a way to mount two actual print extruders. This is an extension of that model, so I'll bring you over to see what I'm talking about. So this design over here actually is the same design with one addition. I'm still working on this piece, so it might not be ready by tomorrow. So I might just have a chat with you guys on subjects that you want to see. if there's a subject that you want to see, let me bring up the chat room. I have a Discord that I have right here, and you can chat with me. I'm not always going to answer right away because, believe it or not, I sleep sometime. But we can talk about different subjects. There's down in here, there's a request or YouTube requests. You can actually request that I talk about something as a video, and if it's not too hard to do, I'll do it. But keep in mind that I have a lot of people making requests either inside the videos or outside them. So usually I try and find the easiest thing to do and then go from there. So let me close this down. I'm going to peek into the chat before we get things done for the day. And I want to take a moment to thank you all for coming into the chat, and thank you for all the super chats. It's greatly appreciated. It's one of the best ways to offset the costs of me doing this tutorial and to keep me motivated. And if you have questions, you know of a couple places where you can ask. And also, the Discord is located in the description of this video. And I want everybody to be safe, be happy, and take care. And have a nice night. And I'm going to log off now.